After passing the strictest rent control law in the country, the city of St. Paul, Minnesota has finally come up with possible solutions that would provide some exemptions to that law. I'm Tony, and this is Real Estate Investing and Landlord News. All right, so I have an interesting article for you today, and it's going over the fact that the city of St. Paul knows they screwed up with this rent control nonsense, okay? Basically, they passed a rent control law that was the most strict rent control in the entire country. It only allows landlords to raise their rents by 3% per year, and there are absolutely no exemptions for new construction or anything. And it basically is going to put a huge burden on not just landlords, but also real estate developers. So 80% of the real estate development that was in the process before the rent control law was passed got canceled. Okay, the developers were like, hey, we can't finance these projects. There's no money to be made, so therefore we're not going to build anything. And a lot of landlords were just completely getting out of the business. I don't blame them either. If you are a landlord of single family rentals and you can sell those single families to owner occupants, that is exactly what I would do, because you are going to fall under the exact same rent control laws as the big, huge mega corporations that own properties. They make no differentiation whatsoever. Not only that, but they're saying, hey, we need to make this housing more affordable, but they didn't put any sort of income limits or anything on the rent control. So you could have people who are making $500,000 a year who get rent control. That doesn't make any sense. This is an idiotic law, and you know what? They just need to throw the whole thing out. There needs to be zero rent control. Instead, they're making things worse. Okay, so they're like, oh, well, we're going to add in an exemption so that they'll build new housing, but then they decide they're also going to be throwing in good cause eviction protections, or what I like to say, the infinite eviction moratorium, making it darn near impossible for landlords to evict anyone ever. Okay, if you want to talk about anything that could make rent control worse, that's it. Okay, that is one of the worst ideas I've heard yet. And I can't believe it, but hey, already they had the worst rent control law, so it shouldn't be too surprising. So before I get into the article, go ahead, hit the like and subscribe button. Maybe leave a comment down below. Let me know what you think. Do you think that there are any good exemptions that you could add to a rent control law that would make it workable for landlords? Or are you like me and you believe that rent control itself is unworkable and needs to be completely thrown out? Just let me know in the comments what you think of this garbage, okay? Because it doesn't make any sense, and it's absolutely awful for everyone who's a property owner, including the people who just own their own home, because they're going to find that their property values are decreasing. Less people want to invest in the area, less people want to spend money in the area, less people are capable of spending money and investing in the area, and that will cause all the property values to decline. Oh, yeah, I'm upset about rent control. I hate it. I think it is a horrible socialist system, and I think it should be banned everywhere. Anyway, this article is coming from twincities.com, and it says, St. Paul's Rent Control Task Force recommends 15-year exemptions for new construction. Let's get into it. With little more than 2 months to go before the advent of rent control on May 1st, St. Paul Mayor Melvin Carter chose 41 members of a stakeholder task force convened to suggest changes to the voter-approved city ordinance. The task force submitted its wide-ranging recommendations to the mayor's office in June, and the final report calls for maintaining the existing 3% cap on annual rent increases while adding a 15-year exemption for new construction. Beyond that, particular recommendations are more general than some members would have liked. No one walked away completely happy, said Marcus Troy, a Westside renter, noting discussion groups within the task force groups formed of renters, landlords, and developers were often at loggerheads. Each of us walked away thinking the other group got a little more than they should have. Well, I guarantee that the landlords and the developers were working together on this, right? And the only opposing party was these renters. The renters, you know what they want? They essentially want free rent forever, okay? They want government to pay for their rent forever. They want to pay zero. They don't give a crap if a landlord makes nothing. They don't give a crap if a developer makes nothing. Okay, the only thing they care about is, oh, I can live for super cheap forever, right? No rent increases ever. I can never be evicted, right? Like that's all they care about. Okay, they don't understand economics. They don't understand. They don't have common sense. Okay, they don't have to pay to maintain their own property, so they think that it's free for some reason. Like no. Okay, the government's not going to take care of you. This isn't a socialist country. And even if it was, guess what? You're going to stay in that property on the backs of those people who are working. Okay, the ones who are making the investment. And guess what? Developers have zero incentive to make any sort of investment if they can't make any money. The same with landlords. Okay, this is ridiculous. And I don't even think that the tenants should have even had a say in it. I don't think they should have any say in how a property owner runs their business. That's partially because the members were often divided over details, such as the degree to which a landlord should be allowed to bank unused rent hikes and then implement them all at once later, once a rental unit is vacant. That system, known as vacancy decontrol, is common throughout rent-controlled housing markets, but not currently allowed under St. Paul Ordinance. These are recommendations based on this is what 60% of the people agreed upon. To be honest, the group was very divided, as is the city, said Tony Sine, a co-chair of the task force. For me, the biggest takeaway was that we need to protect renters more. They need to protect renters more. What more protection could renters possibly need? Okay, they already get, basically a tiny, minuscule rent increase every year. They already had tenant protection laws on the books in the state of Minnesota, on the books in the city of St. Paul. They didn't need any more protections. Final report. The St. Paul Rent Stabilization Stakeholders Group met almost weekly for 16 weeks from February 22nd to June 7th, and their final report was prepared by the Center for Urban and Regional Affairs, or CURA, at the University of Minnesota. The report, which spans some 301 pages of exhibits and findings, recommends maintaining the city's existing annual limit on rent increases at 3%. Installing a provision that better spells out exemptions for a reasonable rate of return, banking unused rent hikes in some form, a 15-year exemption for new construction, as the mayor has called for, and just cause eviction protections, preventing a landlord from ending a lease without an allowed reason. So yeah, let's go over these things. These are the recommendations that this group put together. And I don't believe for one second that the developers or the landlords came up with these ridiculous, things right here, because it doesn't make any sense, okay? They're saying they recommend that they maintain the 3% rent increase. No, okay? That's stupid. First of all, if there's a rent increase at all, it should be based upon what the landlord feels that they need in order to maintain their business. So, just as an example, if my costs went up 8% this year because of extremely high inflation, why in the world am I only raising rents by 3%? That is ridiculous, okay? My costs went up. My insurance went up. My utilities went up. My property taxes went up. The cost of my maintenance went up. The cost of my capital expenditures, when I have to replace that roof, it ain't, the same cost it was 10 years ago. No, it costs a lot more. So guess what? I have to raise my rents to meet my costs. Not only that, but I am entitled, by the fact that I own the property, I am entitled to make a profit, okay? And I can say that 100%. You can't tell me that I'm not entitled, because I can tell you right now, you are not entitled to have somewhere to live. You are not entitled to force me to stay in business. I can just leave the business. If you tell me I can't make any money, guess what? That's exactly what I'm going to do. I'm going to leave the business, and you can go figure out something on your own, because I'm not going to be a landlord if you tell me I can't make money doing it. And a lot of landlords are just like me. Cura will make a formal presentation to the St. Paul City Council at 5:30 p.m. Wednesday, to be followed by a public hearing on the report, which is available online here. The city's new rent stabilization ordinance was assembled by housing advocates and placed on St. Paul's November 2021 ballot, where it was approved with 53% of the vote. The ordinance, for practical purposes, took effect May 1st, giving the city about 6 months lead time to create a budget and administrative infrastructure for the new rules, which could affect as many as 60,000 housing units in the capital city. So going back over, the proposed idea as a 15-year exemption for new construction. Well, here's my question, right? You're a real estate developer. Let's just pretend for a moment the person watching this video is a real estate developer, okay? And you've got $100 million, okay? You've got, $100 million that you're gonna put into this large apartment complex. And you're like, okay, I can build this complex here in the city of St. Paul, right? And I'm given a 15-year exemption on it. So, of course, that, for the first 15 years, that is great. And as a developer, you'll probably sell your project way before that 15 years is up. But why not just build it in the city of Minneapolis right next door where there is no rent control and you don't have to follow any sort of exemption at all, and you can just raise the rents as you see fit forever? And even if Minneapolis passes rent control, why not build it in Bloomington or one of the other suburbs? Or, it's a huge metropolitan area filled with multiple municipalities, multiple counties, multiple cities. Heck, you could even go over to the state of Wisconsin and build. And you don't have to deal with that nonsense. So what is your incentive to build this in St. Paul, knowing that eventually you're going to be stuck under this same 3% rent control nonsense? It's zero. It's absolutely none. There's no incentive whatsoever. So if they think that this is going to suddenly motivate developers to want to build within St. Paul, they are out of their minds. Okay? And the same with landlords, okay? If you're a landlord and you had the option of buying a property within the city of St. Paul and being stuck forever with 3% rent increases, or just buying it in a nice city right next to St. Paul, like a mile away, buying a property right there, a single family house, renting it out, making all the profit you want. Well, you know what I'm gonna do. You know what 99% of landlords are gonna do. So, yeah, there's going to be some people going in there, but it's going to be a lot less. It's going to lead to lower property values. It's going to lead to, a huge glut in new housing development. And they probably are going to repeal it on their own. But if they don't, I don't give a crap, because they get what they deserve. They get what they deserve, dilapidated housing, zero development, and just an overall worse city.